Welcome to the Bible Forum. I'm Warren Sprouse. You're here with me for the next couple of hours. We are on the Bible Forum every Sunday night from 8 until 9, 10-ish, sometimes 10:30. We try to do a couple of hours. We don't always make it. Sometimes it takes more time to get it all in than we have time to deal with. But we're here for you tonight. Got a whole passel of things that I want to share with you. Struggling here to come up with a piece of paper that I had fooled with earlier that I want to share with you in the near future. Let me get started here. We've got a lot of people, some folks showing up in the chat room. Some folks from Wilmington, North Carolina, who the last time I knew had no electric, are now here. Good to see you, Russ. But we have a whole lot of stuff. We do have a telephone line that is plugged in if you want to call in. Please wait until I suggest to you that this is a good time to do it. You can go to our website. You can see what the phone number is, but I'll tell you now it is 843-666-1154. If you'd like to comment, if you'd like to add to the show in some regard, or you just have something you want to share, and we're here for you. But in the meantime, we want to get right into the kinds of things that have been happening in our world this week, and they are I think every week that I'm going to run out of material. That every week, it's going to be something that I can't find, and every single week I keep cutting things out as the week goes on. I have to cut things out because new stuff pops up that's even better than what I already had. I want to talk to you tonight initially about what happens where fairness is running the show. In our world, fairness rules. See if you can follow this thread. A father buys his daughter a cell phone, and then in an effort to discipline the daughter, mom confiscates the phone. Now, the implication here you don't get right away, but later on it shows up, is that mom and dad are divorced. They don't live together. Dad buys the cell phone for the daughter. The mother disciplines the daughter, takes the phone away. The father calls the police, and mom is arrested for misdemeanor felony. She stole the phone from her underage teenage daughter. Later, a lawyer looking at it a little closer says the charge is really larceny by conversion. And so they add that on top of the misdemeanor felony. Both of these carry a 93-day sentence of jail. In the end, the prosecutor determines that the phone was actually owned by the daughter and not by the father. The mother, being a mother of a minor child, all charges were dismissed. The question is, what's the insanity here? I'm sure you can see there's insanity afoot. This is a dysfunctional family and clearly a dysfunctional legal system. The answer is that the now divorced father can be considered initially as the owner of a phone that he purchased and gave to his daughter, and that the daughter can be considered an emancipated adult who has apparently no legal connection to either parent, and that the mother has no rights in this issue concerning her own daughter whatsoever. She's now apparently on her way to jail for 186 days for nothing more than disciplining her daughter. I have an article I've entitled "The Future is Here." It's a report in a magazine. The magazine is called Futurism. It is reported, brother, I didn't start the Facebook stream. Uh, a report in the magazine called Futurism that reports how that the military's Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, something called DARPA, has recently confirmed that a pilot can be sitting in an office in the United States and effectively drop bombs on targets in the Middle East. And they can do that just by using their mind. Huh? I know. That's not particularly amazing. We have technology today. We've even seen some of this at work. But consider the ramifications here and the addition. The Federal Projects team recently unveiled a project that it had been working on since 2015. It is technology that grants one person the ability to pilot multiple aircraft and drones using nothing than their mind. No hands. They think it and it happens. According to DARPA's Justin Sanchez, signals from the brain can be used to command and control not just one aircraft, but 3 simultaneous types of aircraft. The team reports that they have been making progress in this area for years. They just don't tell us. And that back in 2016, a volunteer equipped with a brain-computer interface, they give them these 3-letter or 4-letter acronyms. This one's called BCI. Was able to pilot an aircraft in a flight simulator while keeping 2 other airplanes in formation, all using his thoughts. We've understood for years that pilots could control robot aircraft from huge distances as if they were right there in the cockpit. But they are in what we would call simulators. They're in there connected to it by electronics and wires and whatever, and they're doing this. But this is new, and it's a little bit on the amazing side. Apparently, more and more human beings are being removed from the battlefield. And the implications here is that nations may actually be more likely to go to war, since the combatants are no longer human beings in need of training, equipment, support, medical, psychological, and all the rest of it. They don't need all this manpower in order to do this thing. You know, there are foot soldiers out there now who don't carry their own packs. They have a little mule, electronic mule, with all the heavy equipment on that mule, and they just go on about their business, and the mule follows them, and they tell the mule where to go. Now they can do it apparently just by thinking about it. It's a brave new world, and it's a little bit scary. I've been of the opinion over the last 30 years or so that we are not doing our children any good. Parents don't know how to parent, and the state or federal or local governments, agencies, educational or otherwise, are stepping in to create all kinds of situations and scenarios that disrupt the family structure and just point people in all different kinds of directions. Well, here we've got a professor from a New York university, a fellow by the name of Jonathan Haidt. He is apparently the co-author of something called The Coddling of the American Mind. He was interviewed recently by Glenn Beck. The article can be found at theblaze.com. Haidt and co-author Greg Lukianoff observed what they call strange things happening on college campuses around 2016. Things such as speakers being shouted down simply for having a different point of view, or the idea that students need a warning before they read a Greek myth or a book that contains any sort of violence. They even have a name for it. It's called catastrophizing. If a speaker comes to campus, people may die. The author of this piece labeled all of this disordered thinking, and it is. He says colleges are somehow conveying ideas that are really, really bad. I would add destructive for students, and the students are taking them to heart and thinking themselves into depression. Haidt went on to list the three most destructive ideas being propagated on college campuses. One is the idea that what does not kill you makes you weaker. And secondly, always trust your feelings. And thirdly, life is a battle between good people and evil people. Not a battle between good and evil, a battle between good people and evil people. We now have to label them so that we know which is which. He concluded that to convince students of all three of these principles is to set them up for a life of weakness, a life of complaining, a life of grievance and failure. And the question becomes, and you have it as well as I, why would the academic community want to do this? The academic community has been a change agent in our society for the last 60 or 70 years, going all the way back to the late 50s, early 60s. And it isn't getting better. This is weird, strange, and horribly destructive. Here are some things I don't think you know. A member of the Hurricane Florence response team was removed by the U.S. Coast Guard after he flashed the OK hand signal in the background of a live television news report. The unidentified man briefly looked into the camera, then looked away and made the gesture over his shoulder. Outrage apparently followed on social media. Some said it was inappropriate simply because of the seriousness of the hurricane. Others were offended because they connect the gesture to President Trump and conservatives. Some leftists have claimed the OK sign is a signal of white power. Who knew that was so powerful? And where's all this taking us? There are some new billboards popping up in Oklahoma City, 8 of them actually, in the area that featured messages such as, quote, people of faith love those who have abortions, end of quote. And, quote, God loves those who have abortions, end of quote. They're being paid for by a nonprofit organization called Reproductive Justice. And they represent a campaign which is part of a faith-based initiative to, quote, raise the voices of clergy members who want to show they support women regardless of whether or not they decide to have an abortion. We're going to talk about abortion a little bit later on in the program, so I don't want to get too enmeshed in the process now, except to say that God's not on the side of abortionists. No way, no how. I don't even care what Bible you're using. It doesn't work that way. But we'll talk a little bit about it later. Ever wonder what happened to Bernie Sanders? What would have happened if he had been elected president? The senator sat down recently an interview with a comedian. Her name is Sarah Silverman. She has a new show apparently, and the new show is entitled I Love You, America. I, I don't see how a comedian can have a serious show, and that's not their point in life. And and I don't know. But this particular comedian, this woman, and a serious politician, a serious senator on a show oriented toward inane silliness and being marketed to a people group with an IQ of about 12, you can get some idea where all of this is going. On the show, she explained her friendship with Senator Sanders, saying the two of them met up regularly, including visits to each other's homes back when Sanders was running for office, 2016. They regularly spoke at his spoke at his campaign events. She went on to say that she met Sanders at his Senate office in Washington, D.C. for the interview, and in what can only be considered an attempted joke, the senator revealed what he really thinks about America. Now, I'm going to share what they recorded, what they reported, and I'm going to tell you up front, I think he's joking, at least about some of it. But the question becomes, why would a serious senator be on a joke show and make these kinds of jokes if there wasn't something to be gained here? In the Senate, Sanders said, we cannot use dirty words. We can starve little children. We can bomb houses and buses of children. We can give tax breaks to millionaires, but we can't use dirty words. One observer wrote the senator could have mentioned all of the amazing pieces of legislation that have given people more freedom, including the Civil Rights Act. But instead, his view of America is our weaknesses, and of course furthering his socialist agenda. Now keep in mind, if you pay any attention at all, the senator has plenty of good things to say about Cuba and the Soviet Union, just not about his own country. In reality, UNICEF, United Nations Children Emergency Fund, found that almost no children in the United States are malnourished, and under President Donald Trump's tax reform, those in the tax brackets ranging from incomes of $300,000 to $500,000 saw an increase in their federal taxes. Under President Trump, Americans condemned and attacked Syria for using chemical weapons on their own people. Americans greatly reduced ISIS's reign of terror. President Trump utilized diplomacy to deter violence from North Korea, and our arch enemies are now struggling to finance their war machines. And don't forget the decades when Americans were spreading democracy and stopping the Nazi takeover of the globe. Some found Senator Sanders' attempt to sum up America as we go bomb houses and buses of children to be, well, shameful. Across the pond, over in Great Britain, the Church of England has decided that it's high time for a female diocesan bishop, a bishop on a diocese level. Her name is Rachel Trewell. She is known as Reverend Rachel Trewell. While it's not a commandment, it is the suggestion of Reverend Trewell that parents stop referring to God as He. She said, I don't want to have a bunch of young girls or young boys to hear us constantly referring to God as He, noting also how important it was to be mindful of our language. She explained some non-Christians could feel alienated from the church by sticking with only masculine references of the Almighty. And we certainly wouldn't want that, would we? What about concern for their souls as a first official message? And what about the fact that God is never referred to in the Bible as anything other than He? Masculine pronouns are given to God for a reason. Masculinity speaks of power, strength, determination, decision-making, all of those things that are not really identified with the female of the species in society as a group. Not that they're not capable of it, but we don't think like that. And there's probably a biblical, godly reason why we don't, but I'm not going into that now. And the Reverend Treewell isn't going to explain it to you either. Last Monday, September 17th, was Constitution Day. I don't think you knew that. I didn't know it. I don't pay that close attention, apparently. But it was advertised. It is on the calendar. Rita Dunaway writes for WorldNet Daily. She talks about Constitution Week that ran all last week from Sunday to Sunday, and that it doesn't get a whole lot of press. Over 30 years, she writes, in his scathing book, The Closing of the American Mind, the late Professor Alan Bloom observed that, quote, students now arrive at university ignorant and cynical about our political heritage, lacking the wherewithal to be either inspired by it or seriously critical of it. That was written 30 years ago, about 1980s. The question is, what about today? Well, according to Bloom, this phenomenon results from a clear educational shift. He's saying that today the overriding purpose of modern education is, quote, not to make students scholars, but to provide them with a moral virtue. And that moral virtue is what? Well, it's openness. Meaning they should be open to anything they're being taught. Now, this philosophy pays no attention to our natural rights or the historical origins of our society, which are now thought to have been essentially flawed and regressive. The philosophy is open to all kinds of men, all kinds of lifestyles, all sorts of ideologies. There is no enemy other than man, the man who is not open to everything. I mean, we used to hear all the time, if you open your mind to everything, you'll know nothing. But, that, I guess, is passé. Sooner or later, you have to close on something. Unknown to most people born after 1980, there is an appropriate set of unifying values residing in our founding documents, the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. The author of this piece suggests 5 of them as hallmarks of the American Civic Creed. That commitment to the preservation of natural rights, which are bestowed upon us not by government, but by our Creator. The insistence that all people are equal under the law and none is entitled to favoritism or special status. That a commitment to governing ourselves by selecting our own leaders and then holding them accountable and participating in the various processes of our political and government institutions. The conviction that government power must be limited in order to protect individual liberty And lastly, the realization that the purpose of liberty is to enable individuals to pursue truth and virtue. These two values are noble and good no matter who you are. Without historical knowledge and a shared vision of the public good, how can you ever be anything more than a hodgepodge of racial, ethnic, religious, political, gender, and lifestyle factions, all moving in the direction of whichever is the loudest or the most powerful? Oh, wait a minute, that's what we're doing. Can I get an amen?